I just wanted to start with a couple of quick points. In keeping with the theme of the conference, like we've been telling everyone, please do download the app. The instructions are on the back of your name card. And once you download the app, please click on the social tab and follow our Twitter feed. We're about to start our final keynote, and towards the end of the keynote, we're going to be taking questions through the hashtag SEC Keynote. It's also on the screen. So please do, during the discussion, please do send in your questions using that hashtag. So I'm going to welcome Professor Sheena Iyengar to begin moderating this final discussion. But before she begins, I'm going to play a quick video.
It is said that all the darkness of the world could be shattered by the light in just one pure heart.
Imagine then the hope that would spread if 99 of the pure-hearted came together as one.
These stones, they chose us to do something big. Who are you people?
We have much in common with you. The Nur stone is one of 99. Nur is Arabic for light. Each bestows a powerful gift upon its bearer. The stone was right to choose you. Now you must choose your future.
It's pretty clear. I'm part of something bigger. A new family, maybe. The 99. Why are the stones suddenly appearing now?
I believe it is the will of the stones themselves. They're bringing you stone bearers together for a great purpose. The gemstone was not meant for revenge.
Then what were they made for?
To make things better.
Mine has made things better. For me.
All of us who have newer stones need to work together to help everyone else.
No one else can use your stone. The stone was meant for you.
Welcome to the final keynote of today, and you're in for a real treat. You know, a few weeks ago, when Sandra Navali came to my office and she asked me, could you please come and do this session for me on this Friday? I was looking at my schedule and I was very much ready to say, no, I really can't manage to do this. I want to help you, but I can't do it. And then she told me who was coming. At that point, I knew I had to rearrange everything, and I had to be here because Naif Al-Mutawa is one of my heroes. You know, my parents came to New York in 1971. I was about 2 years old at the time, and they migrated to Flushing, Queens. And I was the daughter of Sikh immigrants, very religious Sikh immigrants. And my father started the very first Sikh temple in Flushing. It was a real moment of pride when they created this temple. When I was growing up, my mother worked in Harlem, and she used to be the manager of many different projects there, and my father used to regularly walk the streets of Harlem, and he always felt like this really cool dude as he would walk the streets of Harlem, because everyone would always look at him and thought he was this cool dude. He was this big, burly guy with a turban on his head, and people just thought he was cool. Now, my father isn't around anymore, and after 9/11, that temple that he created was vandalized. In fact, after 9/11, shortly after 9/11, a number of my family members were harassed, sometimes by the police, particularly the men, and sometimes even the women were harassed by people on the street because they were often mistaken as Muslims. You know, one of the things that really inspired me about Naif, when I first met him at the TED, we were both giving TED Talks a few years ago in England. And what inspired me about him was here was a man who understood two fundamental principles. And the first fundamental principle was that, you know what? When you remove all the differences in the way we look and the colors and, you know, the details of our characters, we're all the same. And the second thing that he did with 99 was he said, you know what? Not only are we so similar, but if you look past those differences in a way that embraces the differences, create characters, you know, with details next to those characters, if we understand that we're at the same time similar and yet different in a way that we can embrace those differences, that's a beautiful thing. And what makes that beautiful is because it gives us an opportunity to have a much larger array of heroes in our life. And I really see that as one of the great goals of the 99. So it's really my pleasure today to give us all an opportunity to hear from Naif, to hear from the guy who made a movie about Naif, Issac Solotaroff, and hear from them their story. What led Naif Al-Mutawa to create what he did? What led Issac to really come up with the idea that this is a man to make a movie about? This is an idea that's worth telling. So with that, let me just describe to you what we're going to do. I'm going to start the ball rolling by asking them some questions, and I'm going to talk as little as possible so that you can really hear from them, their stories. I'll direct the conversation for a little bit, and then we will turn it over to you guys so that you guys can ask the questions that you have for them. All right, so let me start with Naif. Can you tell the audience what gave you the idea to start the 99?
Wow, this is year 11 of the 99, but I can't start there. I have to start back in 1979 when I was 8 years old. And as a parent, I've made many mistakes with my children, as I'm sure if you had kids, you probably did with yours. But I think nothing compares to the mistake that my parents made in 1979 when they, you know, my conservative Arab Muslim parents put me on an airplane and accidentally sent me to a Jewish summer camp in New Hampshire. It's a true story. I figured it out by year 6, didn't tell them. My kids go there now. But that was the very beginnings of kind of growing up in the Middle East, where, you know, a lot of stuff was in turmoil. I grew up in Kuwait and going to Jewish summer camp and kind of feeling at home in both places, yet feeling not at home in both places, and kind of navigating two sides of the same coin. Went to undergrad and graduate school here, and then I found myself at Columbia Business School in the summer. Graduated summer 2003. I was part of the entrepreneurship program and had a business plan to get into the Islamic nutraceutical market. I was not happy with the way that certain herbs that were being sold in our part of the world were being packaged, and that was the business I wanted to get into. And then the US invaded Iraq, and the idea of creating a factory in a war zone didn't make sense. And I had a business plan, but no business. And I literally was in a cab in London when the idea hit me about kind of, you know, creating alternative role models for my own kids, based on the principles that we grew up with, but taking a different trajectory in terms of how they're shown. And because my thinking was that the only way to really beat extremism is through arts and culture. It's what curbed the Catholic Church in the 15th century, and nothing like that has really happened in our part of the world. And I felt that you need to go back to the same place that the bad guys are pulling out their messages and create alternative, positive role models to compete for that space. And that's when the 99 was born.
Issac, what made you decide to make a movie about him?
Well, I think my motivation was a little less principled. It started with the girl.
That's always good.
Yeah, I was actually dating a woman whose brother had. So, Naif goes to this Jewish summer camp and then continues to spend summers in the United States and goes to Brown for summer school, and ends up rooming with the brother of this woman I was dating, and their father was an advisor to Naif and a mentor to Naif and a mentor to me. And I was between projects. This was in about 2005, 2006. So Naif had been raising money for a few years at that point. And I thought, what an incredible experience it would be to follow the story as it progresses. I mean, we had no idea where the company was going to go. But what to me was so appealing was that Naif was such a sort of, he's a bridge builder. I mean, he's got a foot in these very disparate worlds that just constantly miscommunicate with each other, and has this incredible ability to interface and translate cross-culturally in a way that I'd never seen before. And I thought, I didn't know if this was going to lead to a fatwa or it was going to lead to a great cultural and financial success, and being a bit of a risk taker myself, I thought I'd hitch my wagon to Naif for a few years, which is what I did.
What was the most amazing part of his story?
In terms of making the film?
Mm-hmm. What were the sort of amazing sort of tidbits or moments?
I would guess it would have to be Indonesia.
I was going to say that.
So we were in Indonesia for Ramadan, and actually you should help pick up on this as well, because you were the one who was being grilled. But Naif was basically on this
The comic was launching in Bahasa Indonesian.
Right, and it was this press junket that we were on, and I was following Naif around during Ramadan. And towards the tail end of our few days in Indonesia, in Jakarta, the publisher said, I want to take you to a more conservative.
Yes, that was the word he used.
Magazine. And it turned out to be it was well beyond conservative. And we walk in and there's covers of the magazine with members of Al-Qaeda and sort of...
Don't be scared of them.
Yeah, and I was scared right away. And, and also I'm Jewish. And
what?
Which actually had never really presented a problem until I was in Indonesia with the publishers of this particular magazine and began to grill me about why I was doing this and where I was from. And I managed to sort of deflect their questions, and then they turned their sights on you.
They also asked you your religion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were really. I mean, it was very not a very friendly place. But basically, they brought in 3 guys trained in Saudi, spoke better Arabic than I ever will, even though I grew up on the border there. And they backs and forth, and so I knew what kind of environment I was going to be, so I prepared myself psychologically before sitting down. I said to them, they started saying this is wrong, and that you shouldn't be using the attributes of God and stuff like that. And I said to them, I knew I had to be wrong to be right here. So I heard that God created heaven. I learned that God created heaven. Was it 3 levels, 4 levels? I forget. Knowing the answer was 7. And so one of them said 7, and this one quoted the Quran. The other one quoted something from the Prophet, peace be upon him, sayings. And they looked at each other. This is too easy. We got him. And so I just sat back and I said, you know what, guys? You can have the 7th level all to yourself. Let us compete for the other 6, right? And so you don't need an A+ to graduate from school. You don't need an A+ to get into heaven. So the older one kind of smiled and said, I said, do you see this as, as us trying to promote values? He said, yes, but. I said, yes or no? And he said, yes. I said, okay, now let's talk. But I was able to bring the conversation closer to my language than to what they wanted to do in there. But that was not even now, 11 years later, that was probably the most unfun interview I've ever had.
And we documented all of it. It actually, if anyone saw the film today, it is how the film begins, is Naif's meeting with this magazine.
So where do you get the idea from? Like, once you had this sort of revelation, then what did you do with it?
I should have done nothing. No, it's. What I did is I was literally in a cab going from Edgware Road to Harrods in London, which is a pilgrimage Kuwaitis make at least once a summer. And in that cab ride, I turned to my sister and I said, my sister turned to me and said, Naif, you had told me that after school you'd go back to writing and I'd illustrate. She's actually very talented. And I wrote and illustrated a series of books in my mid-20s that won award from UNESCO for tolerance and stuff like that. But the idea of going back to writing children's books after having my doctorate in psychology in Columbia Business School, that's not for me anymore. And so I said, somewhat for me to go back, it's got to be something that has the potential of Pokemon. Not meaning that I could do Pokemon, meaning just, shut up, I'm not going to do this. But my mom was there, so I couldn't say shut up. So she said okay, and she became quiet, and then I started Free Associate, as any New York trained psychologist would. I said Pokemon. My next thought was there had been a fatwa against Pokemon. It's actually illegal in some parts of the Muslim world. My thought after that was, my God, what's happened to Islam, and who's making these random decisions for my children? My next thought was of Allah or God, and how disappointed He must be. My next thought was that Allah had 99 attributes, and ironically, it brought me full circle back to Pokemon, which has over 1,000 attributes, and that was the aha moment. I went to work, wrote a few storylines, business plan, needed help with the financials. Yes, even though I went to Columbia Business School, I was not very good at financials. And ended up raising money. I raised my first $1 million from my classmates in business school. And the alumni people here still chase me trying to figure out how I did that. And then the rest came from people who knew me growing up, but who are part of this fund or that institution or whatever back home. And we hit the floor running. The idea came to me in a cab in June '03. I'd raised my first round by June '04. And just, I tried to get people involved in the project, but trying to get people involved with an Islam-based superheroes 18 months after 9/11 in New York, it was pretty tough. And so what we ended up doing is, a friend of mine had this crazy idea of wanting to revive Cracked magazine, which was their competitor to Mad for 50 years. So we bought the magazine and brought in a team that used to run Marvel. So we had the former publisher and the former head of marketing and the former editor-in-chief of Marvel.
Why did you decide to start with publishing? Why did you decide? Because the first thing you did was comic books.
Yeah. The reason for the comic books was because in Kuwait, there's only one class of shares. So there's no common shares and preferred shares, one class. And so the idea of raising a little bit of money means you as the entrepreneur controls the board, which is not the way it works here. So it's not fair to the people putting in the money. So I wanted to take less money, but at the same time be in control of the project. And the only way to do that was to start with something that could be a revenue-driving R&D like comic books versus animation, which would cost a lot more money, and I'd lose control of the philosophy of the company from day one. But that was the thing.
You did comic books for...
We still have new ones coming out. We still have a couple more coming out to end the series online, but we stopped doing the paper ones 2.5 years ago. Now there's a 99 Comics app on iTunes where we put in every couple months.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge to the 99? Both of your perspectives would be good to hear on that.
Oh, God.
You go.
So, there are a lot of challenges, and there still are. Funding is always a challenge. People who think they are the only ones that get to control what Islam means are a huge challenge, whether it's the right wing here in America or the right wing back in my neck of the desert. And it seems like they disagree on everything except trying to shut us down. We had this situation here in America 3 years ago, which was, we were at the top of our game. We had sold our series to a major US broadcaster. We had a series that came out, published by DC Comics, that has Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, who actually found her clothes for the first time in 70 years, I'll have to tell you. Working with the 99, which was amazing for us. And then we had President Obama talk publicly about our project in a speech he gave, which brought the who's who from the right after us. Obama's Muslim, and this proves it. He's trying to brainwash your kids with Sharia superheroes. Anybody watching the show become radicalized and become a jihadi. And my favorite was, we can't let those Muslims brainwash our children like the Mexicans did with Dora the Explorer.
That's good.
And this ended up delaying us and seriously giving us a serious setback for a couple of years, because our broadcaster got the jitters, started delaying broadcasts for a couple of years. And meanwhile, the rest of the world looks to America for leadership. We ended up coming out in some parts of Europe, throughout Asia on Cartoon Network, throughout the Middle East, where I was banned initially in Saudi. But the challenge that hit me the hardest at home happened, actually, I spoke about it publicly once, and this is the second time I speak about this publicly. The first time I spoke about it, I locked eyes with the Minister of Information in Kuwait at a keynote, and he didn't see it coming. But I kind of publicly exposed what happened. But basically, in February 2011, the 99 Unbound, which is a film made for television, the first 4 episodes of the series, which came out here at the New York Film Festival, amazing reviews, throughout the world, Korea, Scotland, so on and so forth, England. Came out on a cinema in Kuwait, under the patronage of His Highness the Emir, several ministers, several ambassadors, the US ambassador, Canadian, India, full house. Great reviews. And then this is February 1st. February 3rd, the Islamic Parliament comes into power in Kuwait. By February 6th or 7th, people are tweeting that I'm blaspheming against God. February 8th, one of the senior sheikhs in Kuwait retweets to his God knows how many followers. Next thing you know, a new Minister of Information doesn't know what to do. Sends the film to get a ruling on it from the people who were supposed to censor the films, who approved it the first time. Guess what? They approved it the second time. And he single-handedly pulled it and sent me to get a fatwa from the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. So I went to the head fatwa guy, and he said, Naif, he said, this is not our business. They sent you to us for us to be the reason why the film was not shown. It's like every one of these films that shows in Kuwait, I'd stop if I was going to put Islamic rulings. He goes, but this is not our business. This is just a waste of time. So I went back to the minister and I said, what happens if I don't play? If I don't get the fatwa? If I don't ask positive or negative? He said, you can't show it in Kuwait. I said, fine. But what happened is the government showed their support with the minister and under the patronage of the emir, and the next day pulled the rug out from under me. And so I started getting threatening calls, threatening texts. And so that was the time where I was really not very happy. But I knew that the 99 was coming out on TV in their living room within a few months, which is why I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't talk about it until that summer when it actually went into their living rooms. And I gave a talk in Kuwait where the American ambassador was sitting next to the Minister of Information. I talked about how I got bullied by the right wing here, and then I locked eyes with the minister and I said, as you know, Your Highness, that doesn't just happen in America, it happened right here at home. And I told the story for the first time, and this is the second time I tell it.
I think I would speak in terms of the creative content of the 99, both the comic book and the animation series, because I was following, along with following Naif, I was also following the creative process. And in talking to, now you can talk about some of the people that you were able to bring into the company. You had the people who'd been top executives at Marvel, and now with the animation series, you have writers who have written for
Ben 10 and Star Wars, and
yeah. So you managed to attract this great talent, and I think the challenge that they often expressed was, how do you do something that is both socially conscious that also entertains kids? Mm-hmm. And because kids like subversive stuff, and the 99 is trying to appeal to kids, but at the same time try to deliver these very mature messages about
tolerance
and universal values, and how do you spoon feed kids vegetables and make them think that you're giving them chocolate pudding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge in making the movie for you?
Making the documentary?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like any sort of media venture. It was raising financing. Fortunately, PBS came in about halfway through with production. And I guess, again, speaking from a content perspective, what was challenging is that I had this sort of, Naif and I became almost like brothers because we sort of shared an appointed father, this guy who had been a mentor to both of us, and that challenge of doing something that is both documentaries walk this very fine line, but they are supposed to have a degree of objectivity, and I was very invested, obviously, in the success of the company and in Naif, but also at the same time, like when I was editing the film, I don't know if you would remember it this way, but basically it was like radio silence, because I had to just focus on making the best film that I could, the most informed film and the most objective film. And so I didn't want to talk to Naif for about 6 months, 8 months while I was editing. And I think trying to be true to the story, and I think if anyone saw the documentary, it's fairly flattering, but there's probably stuff there that you would have preferred that I didn't include.
We'll talk about that later.
And so it's trying to walk that line was very challenging, and it's not an unusual one that documentary filmmakers have, I think.
Talking about the editing, during this radio silence that Isaac was talking about, I was walking up the Upper West Side in the 60s, 68, 69, 70th Street, somewhere in there, just walking, on my own, whatever. And this skinny kid with a yarmulke is like following me and like staring at me and following. And so I start to pick up my step, and he started to pick up his step, and I'm like, and then he goes, Naif Al-Mutawa, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get Mark David Chapman right outside the Dakota. I was like, what is, and I tried and I said yes, and he goes, I'm so and so, I'm working with Isaac on the film, and I'm the editor, right?
He was the assistant
editor, and I was like, my heart was it's like I've seen hundreds of hours of you, but you don't know me. I'm like, okay. But I mean, now one of the highlights for me during this whole process has been the people that just stepped out of the shadows to help, not expecting anything in return. And there were a lot of those, but perhaps the name you probably recognize is Michael Eisner, who in 2007 saw me as a favor to a friend of his for a few minutes, which became a couple hours, and then it became another couple hours in New York. And basically, he if not for him, we would have gone bankrupt years ago. He helped. He even insulted me publicly at the Library of the Lowe's Hotel. I showed him the contract we were about to sign with the animation company, and because our lawyers had signed off, and business-wise, it made sense. But I pulled it out, and he looked at it for a couple minutes, looked back up at me, bit his lip, looked back down, and said to me, "I thought you said you went to business school." Took a pen and tore that thing apart, and had he not, we would not have survived. I mean, it really was that bad. Stuff like, for example, if the production goes over budget, it's the responsibility of the producing partner, not the financing partner. I mean, stuff like that, which could have killed us, because season 1 got delayed, and by a couple $1 million, so that could have really, really killed us. And if not for him, we probably wouldn't have made it into the US. We're on Netflix now here in America, and the reason for that is the broadcaster that bought the rights bought the cable rights for 5 years, and they can still sit on them for 2 more years, unfortunately, without showing them. But their online rights expired November 17th, and so by December, Michael made that call for us, so we were on Netflix. We've been on Netflix here in America since December last year. And a lot of nice reviews on our Facebook page and on the series itself.
So I know we have to open this up in a couple minutes to the audience, but let me ask you sort of final thoughts type question here. What is it? Let's say in the next 10 years, as 99 progresses, what are you hoping will happen? What would be an outcome that would make you happy or make you feel that you succeeded?
I think, there's 2 outcomes, two things. Number one, that more people become less scared to approach Islam from a culture, entertainment, secular perspective versus religious perspective, because that's extremely important to curb extremism, extremely. So because right now, if you're not part of them, then you're not part of anything to do with Islam, and that struggle there, which is inherent in our culture, needs to get broken. That was a big part of the reason why I wanted to do this. And the second thing is that take our rightful place as the next Spider-Man, the next Batman. I mean, that's every TV series kind of. The magic number to get to the animation is 52 episodes. We're done.
To be the cartoon that every kid watches.
Exactly.
Right? All around the globe.
Without breaking anything, yes. Which is what the fatwa from Fox would tell you they'd do. So.
I guess I wish that the film could be seen in more business schools. I'm not just saying that because I'm at Columbia Business School. My wife also happens to teach here, so I'm not just making a shameless plug here for people to use the film. But I think Naif's story is, and I think the way we try to present it in the documentary, should serve as an inspiration to other entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who do want to make a social difference. Because I think what we try to show in the documentary as well is that challenge of both being of wanting to change the world at the same time having to make payroll every month and the inherent tension that creates and how one tries to wrestle with that. And also to make people think about that reality probably before they start their social venture as well. So I guess that would be my answer.
What would you say was your biggest aha lesson from his story?
Well, it's
because you were editing, a big lesson that was meaningful for you.
The lessons weren't so much in the editing of the film. It was spending a significant portion of 3 years in the Middle East and not in Israel. And it was just, one of those lessons that everyone should, it's one of those experiences that everyone should have of of being in a environment where you've been told lots of things about the way people are going to respond to you, and learning that the reality transcends stereotypes. And that was my experience time and time again when I was there.
All right.
It's great.
Perfect timing. Thank you guys so much. So just a reminder, SEC Keynote for questions. If you can tweet questions, please do so. If you do not have Twitter on your phone, V will also be going down with a mic. We have, I'm waiting for questions to come through here. It's our new technology that should be in the future with Twitter questions, right? Is there anyone with an audience question to get us started? All right, there's one in the back there. I guess all right, she's going to. So, from your experiences, how would you describe, and I'm going to use a word that makes no sense, but like the recipe for the right kind of content? Like, what's the best story? What's been the most effective story? What's your biggest impact been in the story you put out there that you were most sort of proud of, maybe? Does that make sense?
No, you take
You
this.
said it made sense. You answer.
It was
Well, you mean, what we do is very different.
right.
Right? Yeah,
I
because
was
he's
actually
in the
asking more about
fiction
the-
world, I'm in the nonfiction world.
I was thinking, well, okay, has there been any collisions of your two worlds? Have you done documentary?
Have I?
Yes.
No, I'm not really a media person. I'm a clinical psychologist by background. I have a clinic. I lecture at the medical
Right.
school back home. For me, this is like philosophy, psychology that happened to take the media form. I'm not like, I would never do, for example, another series, I don't think, or another entertainment property. This was more about kind of changing the way people think, because as a
Right. But so it has to be fiction to do that? Or you just chose fiction?
No, growing up, when I was 9, I told my parents when I grew up I was going to be a writer, and they said that's a great hobby. And so I've done a lot of writing of different forms. I do a lot of satirical essays and, writing about Islam and stuff like that, but this just happened to be the form this took. It's not, I don't know if that answered your question, I'm sorry.
I can't say in terms of what I do that intention plays a huge part in the final outcome, because so much of this is determined by luck. I was lucky enough to follow Naif for a number of years during this important period of the company's development, and I got a great story out of it. And fortunately, PBS came along and helped me finish the film. But there are other films that I've started that were great that never got finished because they didn't get financing. So there's a certain surrendering that has to happen in my business to just in a leap of faith that you're going to go all in on something and you're not sure how it's going to turn out, and sometimes it turns out great and sometimes it doesn't. It's a horrendous business model. Yeah.
And just to answer your question a different way, so the second social venture I started was my clinic. So I have a clinic in Kuwait. I have 27 therapists who work for me. I don't practice anymore. And we do, even though the government has free services, 15 to 20% of our service is pro bono to kids who can't afford therapy. And the reason I started that clinic was because I wasn't happy with how psychology was practiced in Kuwait, because in Kuwait, you need a bachelor's degree and 7 years of breathing oxygen to open a clinic. No training, no master's, no doctorate, nothing. And I was busy using my training trying to change the way the world saw Islam, and 5 years ago opened this clinic. For me, it's always been important to have a cause to wish to, because otherwise I don't have the energy to do it. After leaving business school, I know a lot of people got into business for business's sake. That wasn't me, and that just wasn't the way I was made up.
That's great. All right, well, I'm going to take one from here, and we can go back and forth a little bit. So, sorry, let me read this properly. What kind of reactions have you been seeing from parents of your target audience?
So I'm assuming that's for the animation. The parents whose kids have watched it, I've had amazing reviews. I've had reviews from teachers, one teacher in Chicago who the kids in the school wanted to stay during recess to watch 99 versus going out. Parents in our region, here in the States, we have probably the third or fourth largest Facebook page from our region. We have almost 1.5 million people on our Facebook, and we get a lot of comments there. But very, very positive. But at the same time, because of this swirl of controversy that's around the 99, You know, so one of the biggest challenges I had, for example, personally, and I know I made the right decision, but I still regret making this decision, is, you know, back in the thick of kind of being labeled, I got labeled as an evil Arab American terrorist, to which my reply on Twitter was, I can't believe they called me American. You know, if you're gonna insult me, at least get your facts straight. But this controversy that's around it, I mean, you know, twice we got approached by the Daily Show to do segments, and I really wanted to do it, but our PR agency that we were working with at the time said, convinced us not to do it because, you know, this would have been great for people to know about it, but wouldn't be great for people watching it, because even me as a father, I have 5 kids, 2 of them are here, 5 boys. If the show's controversial, I'm not going to want them to watch it unless I watch it. I don't have time to watch it, right? And so just that, the people who kind of felt that swirl of controversy kept their kids away. So it's a very fine line.
Interesting. Looks like we have a couple in the audience. We have to end not too long, so maybe 2 more questions. We'll do an audience and then maybe back to this. Yeah, thanks, Diana. Oh, sorry. I guess V already set up. So V's and then Diana's, and then we'll see if we're done here. Thanks.
Hi. So my question is, we're all sort of here as inspiring social entrepreneurs to solve problems, and there is like a fine line between the problem you're identifying and the problem that actually exists. And so through your work, I think your work is absolutely wonderful and I really appreciate it. But from what I just came out from watching your documentary, and it seems that you clearly identified a problem that you really believed existed, but it turned out that your work turned out to be a huge problem backlashing towards you. So how do you balance in your head and in your work your problem solving along with the reaction of the problem that has been coming towards
It's very
you?
tough. It's very, very tough. It's very tough. I mean, it's like when I broke my ankle. Like, you know, I tell myself, you know, thank God it wasn't in your neck or your back. It doesn't make this hurt any less. You know, it's very tough, but you need to kind of balance and kind of keep your eye on the prize and look into the future, and kind of, you know, about 5 years from now, not 5 minutes from now. But it's easier said than done. I can't tell you there have been times where I've been like really upset and, you know, but I mean, this whole thing that what happened in Kuwait, my own country, that was just, I mean, what do you do with that? And when it happened in America is far away. I go there once in a while. When it happens in Saudi, fine, it's next door. But when it happens in our country, what do you do? You know, so you need to kind of just keep, I mean, the best way to deal with stuff like that is the technical term in psychology is cognitive reappraisal. Instead of getting upset that your grandmother got you a sweater for your birthday that you didn't like, just, you know, this is the best she could do, and because it's the expression of love for you, and you keep going with your life.
Yeah, another audience question we can do, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I really do find your work, both of you, very inspiring. So in general, we tend to see that certain kinds of problems require certain kinds of solutions. So in general, we see green problems having a more kind of mechanical or practical solution. We see economic empowerment issues having more of a financial or political solution. So my question to you both is, do you feel that for cultural or religious issues that art tends to be the ideal solution form? And, you know, building upon that, what are other ways that you see as being most ideal to sort of combat the issues that we see in this space?
The Cosby's
Okay, I mean, I think art, education, I mean, it took, you know, the Cosby Show's credit not only that it changed the way that white America saw black America, it changed how black America saw itself, right? Because all of a sudden, the dad wasn't a mechanic or a garbage man or you know, a low-level job. He was a doctor, and mom was a lawyer, not a stay-at-home wife, and they had a kid in college. I mean, stuff like that changes. It gives people things to aspire to. Or even the show, I don't know if you guys watched 24, which wasn't very kind to people like me, but 24 had 2 bad white presidents who were warmongers, one of whom looked like and acted like Richard Nixon during Watergate. You had 2 good black presidents who were young, strong, good-looking, ethical, and very, very leadership, the kind of leader you want. And the next year, America votes in Barack Obama, the first African-American president. So I think media can go a long way towards changing people's realities, not just reflecting people's realities. It can change them. Right? So the question, so I think that, but also education is very important, because you can't, if people keep getting bad education, media can only go so far. So it has to work hand in hand with education.
All right, I think we'll take a final question from Twitter.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big one, but I think we can do the smaller part. I mean, the first is, Naif, do you feel there's progress being made on American-Muslim relations? That's a really huge one, but I think the second part maybe you can address really specifically. It says, has the 99 had a tangible impact so far? And I'd love if you can close off by saying, how do you measure impact and what's the impact so far?
So, the first question is big. I don't know, but there's a great, I recommend a couple of reports to be read on that. One is called Fear Inc., which came out a couple years ago about how $47 million was funneled by 7 organizations to 5 people really, and the same 5 people who attacked us, who attacked All American Muslim, the TV show, who inspired Anders Breivik to go on his rampage in Norway. And there's a new report that came out by CARE about how over $150 million has been funneled since then into the same people who are making money going out there to scare people about Islam. So, but that being said, there are people like that in our neck of the desert too. There's a person in parliament in Kuwait last year wanted to abolish churches. The crazy doesn't just grow here, it goes everywhere, right? There's a certain percentage of all people who are like that, and it's just the way they're wired. In terms of impact, I mean, the biggest impact I've seen, I mean, you can't really measure impact. I mean, psychologists are notorious for saying, oh, you know, he's better because he worked with me. When in fact, there's like 100 other things that went on in a person's life, right? So it's one variable out of many, so it's very hard to judge. And we've only been on TV for 1.5 years now. So, you know, if there's any impact, we'll be part of a lot of things that impacted at the same time. But I can say going out and telling my story is more measurable in terms of impact, because I've seen people kind of come up and, you know, share their story or one advice, and I make time when I can to do that. And people have started magazines that are nothing to do, you know, but people have got into that it wasn't as scary, because once you hear about the story about somebody going out there and challenging their own demons and then other people's kind of reactions, you become inspired to kind of do your own thing in your own way of doing it. That's been more tangible for me measuring than the impact of the actual 99.
All right, I think we'll close out. Professor Iyengar, you have any closing words?
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've had a wonderful day. And you should, if you haven't already seen it, you should definitely see WHAM, BAM, Islam, and you should definitely check out 99. Well, thank you very much.